I have said repeatedly, we are a profoundly broken nation full of broken people these days. And the brokenness on the left, part of the problem that we deal with as a society is that they're not willing to acknowledge their own brokenness. The level of hysteria over Republican calls and criticisms of the FBI have just taken on a new dimension. I want to play for you this audio clip of left-wing Washington Post columnist Dana Milbank. He's on George Stephanopoulos' show. Listen to this.
Look, this has been a horrific week in the sense of the threat to the rule of law. I mean, Republicans, with their violent talk, actual violence, have lit a bonfire in the threat of the rule of law. Earlier, Governor Hogan was saying he thinks this week was a win for Donald Trump. I think it's exactly the opposite. We can talk about them motivating Donald Trump's base. Guess what? They were already motivated. But what's happening now is they are putting Donald Trump on the ballot because of the way the Republicans have all grasped around him, the way they're going to knock out 9 of 10 of the House Republicans who voted for impeachment because of the Dobbs decision, because of the January 6th hearings. More and more, the midterm elections are looking less like a referendum on the Biden administration, more like, do you want MAGA back? And I think that is going to be the long-term takeaway from this week.
You know, the fact that they're trying to do that, and of course, this has been the wishful thinking of the left for a while, that they're going to try to make it a referendum on Trump. That's what they've tried to do. You had Joe Biden a while back with his ultra MAGA line. That's what they've been trying to do. There's a real problem here. It is that the left is unwilling, unable, incapable of acknowledging violent extremism on its own side. And this, my friends, sets the stage for really the next several elections. Follow along with me here, if you will. Do you remember Andrew Joseph Stack III? You probably don't. Andrew Joseph Stack III was a pilot. And one day he climbed in his Cessna and decided to go pay a visit to the IRS by slamming his plane into the building in Austin, Texas, committing suicide. Andrew Joseph Stack slammed his turboprop plane into the side of the IRS building in Austin, Texas, and it was immediately presumed to be a right-wing terrorist by the media. They rushed out to claim it was a right-wing terrorist. And it turned out that Andrew Joseph Stack was a communist. And Andrew Joseph Stack was upset that the IRS was not taking from the rich and giving to the poor and was wasting money. And he was tired of seeing widows suffer and people not get compensation. And he was tired of his own dealings with the IRS. And he committed suicide and decided to take out some IRS agents with him. He was immediately presumed to be a right-wing nut job. James J. Lee, the same year in 2010, went into the Discovery Channel headquarters in Maryland and took hostages. The police stormed the building. They killed him while it was going on. Blue check progressives and members of the media presumed it had to be a conservative. It had to be a conservative. Why would someone on the left storm the Discovery Channel's building and take hostages? I mean, obviously, it was someone on the right who was upset with the Discovery Channel and its coverage of climate change and progressive ideology. Turns out, James J. Lee was a far-left environmental radical who believed that the Discovery Channel was not doing enough to fight climate change. He was an environmental militant, they had to admit. Many of the people who were speculating it had to be a conservative deleted their tweets to cover up the fact that their presumption was that it was some sort of right-wing nut job. Turns out he was a left-wing environmental fundamentalist who believed that the Discovery Channel was not doing enough to advance the climate change message. It needed to do more. He died at the scene, shot by police. Floyd Lee Corkins went into the Family Research Council in Washington, D.C. The Southern Poverty Law Center had labeled the Family Research Council a hate group. I have a lot of friends who worked there at the time. And Floyd Lee Corkins stormed into the building with bags of Chick-fil-A and a gun. Floyd Lee Corkins had been inspired by the Southern Poverty Law Center's website and anti-FRC rhetoric to go to the building, murder the employees, and stuff their faces with bigoted chicken sandwiches from Chick-fil-A. Floyd Lee Corkins was a gay rights activist. He was stopped by the hero security guard of the building, who himself was shot, but was able to incapacitate Floyd Lee Corkins, who's now in prison. James Hodgkinson attempted the mass assassination of Republican members of Congress. Again, a Southern Poverty Law Center fan and a massive fan of Rachel Maddow and Bernie Sanders. After hearing Republicans were going to repeal Obamacare and kill old people, Floyd Lee Corkins decided he needed to drive down to Washington and stop Paul Ryan and the Republicans from shoving Grandma off a cliff in the way the Democratic ads were portraying Ryan and the Republicans. So he showed up, found out where their baseball game practice was, and began shooting the Republican members of Congress, including Steve Scalise, who nearly lost his life. The police shot him. And what did the FBI say? The FBI decided it was actually suicide by police that really had nothing to do with trying to assassinate Republican members of Congress. The guy just was looking for somewhere he could go and die. Don't forget, that's what the FBI concluded. Even Democratic members of Congress were outraged by what the FBI did. I'm old enough to remember a couple of months ago, a man showed up at Brett Kavanaugh's house with zip ties, gun, knife, and other tools designed to break into his house, tie him up, torture him, and kill him. He only confessed because his sister pressured him into doing it. As the man said police were coming close, he wound up confessing he wanted to kill Brett Kavanaugh over abortion, over Roe v. Wade. This was before the decision was even released. And I'm old enough to remember the White House to this day has not condemned the man who attempted to assassinate Brett Kavanaugh. I'm old enough to remember Supreme Court justices being harassed at restaurants because of the decision. And the White House said, this is democracy. This is democracy. For them to show up at their houses and protest and harass their families, it's just democracy in action. That's what the White House said. It's just democracy in action, said the White House press secretary. I'm old enough to remember that. Only happened a few months ago. Jane's Revenge has taken credit for a series of firebombings of pro-life pregnancy centers around the country. For those of you who don't know what they do because you've been indoctrinated by the left, these pregnancy centers provide free health care to pregnant moms. They can get their ultrasounds, their neonatal vitamins, see doctors, they can get cribs, they can get rocking chairs, they can get all sorts of stuff. For free or at discount, they can get diapers. They don't just meet with the mom while they're with the pregnant. They meet with the mom after the child is born. They teach the mom how to raise the child. They walk with the mom. They do life together. A series of them have been vandalized, others firebombed. The FBI not even bothering to investigate. Jane's Revenge is probably a group of people out of some congressional office taking credit for other people's violence, but they've certainly perpetuated it by amplifying it and bragging about it and taking credit for it and encouraging more of it. The Atlantic magazine has a piece out on how the Republicans are pouncing on Jane's Revenge. They love it. They love the attention. They love the presumption of violence. It's all the Republicans doing it. The FBI, by the way, totally ignored Jane's Revenge. It's a local crime matter. It's like Kermit Gosnell, the abortionist, who was literally inducing labor, flushing babies down toilets. He was literally doing that. The Washington Post refused to cover it. They said it was a local crime story until it became a national crime story, and then they buried it. Then of course, there's Antifa. There are the riots during George Floyd protests where they burned down small businesses, stormed down streets. There's the riots during Trump's inauguration where they were burning up limousines and small businesses and smashing windows in Washington, D.C. The media never wants to lecture the left on its violent tendencies. The media never gives a damn about the left's violence. The media only ever hand-wrings about, oh my gosh, Donald Trump said something, and now Republicans are criticizing the FBI. There was more coverage of some dude walking into an IRS or FBI office in where was it, Indianapolis, with a nail gun the other day than there has been national coverage of Jane's Revenge burning down pro-life pregnancy centers around the country. Floyd Lee Corkins went in armed to the Family Research Council with bags of Chick-fil-A to stuff the mouths of the bodies he intended to slay. The media passed it off as no big deal. One guy goes into an FBI office with a nail gun, and oh my gosh, Donald Trump is provoking people to violence. Right-wing extremism is all the danger today. How can you take these people seriously? Violence on both sides becomes a problem, but only one side does the media obsess and fret about when there's an entire history of massive violence on the other side. In just the last decade, Andrew Stack and James J. Lee in 2010, left-wing extremists. One's a Marxist, one's an environmentalist. Floyd Lee Corkins, James Hodgkinson, the Kavanaugh would-be assassin, Jane's Revenge. The list goes on. That's not an exhaustive list. Antifa, the Black Lives Matters rioters in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and Washington, D.C. And yet no one in the media cares. It's mostly peaceful, you know. It's nut-picking to say that one person is representative. And yet you label the entire right wing as extremists because the FBI overplayed its hand, went into Donald Trump's home and took documents out. They could have come up with a better way to do it. They did not exercise prudence in the way you might say they did with Hillary Clinton, and you people want to continue to give them a pass and then scream about right-wing extremism. Is it any wonder people don't take the press seriously these days? Violent extremism is a problem on both sides. But when only on one side is held to account and it's over-exaggerated and overplayed, why should anyone take the press seriously on any of this stuff? The answer is you shouldn't, nor should you take the Democrats seriously on this stuff when the Democrats have a history of egging on violent extremists on their own side and then pretending they didn't or it didn't happen when it did. They're still protesting Supreme Court justices, and the Democrats are still fine with abortion extremists firebombing pregnancy centers, and yet don't criticize the FBI, and God forbid you show up with a rosary somewhere and pray. You'll be a right-wing extremist.